Ritu Dhand, Dr. Ritu, Chief Scientific Officer at Springer Nature, a position she has held since January 2022. In this role, she is dedicated to driving editorial excellence across the Springer Nature Journal's portfolio while championing open and inclusive publishing practices. Her efforts are focused on upholding trust and integrity in research publishing, ensuring the highest standards for the whole research community. Prior to her current role, Dr. Dhand served as Vice President of Nature Journals, where she oversaw the editorial strategy and management of Nature, Nature Communications, and the Nature Research and Review journals. Her extensive editorial career began as a cancer editor for Nature, where she was later promoted to Chief Biological Sciences Editor, overseeing all life science research and leading the editorial team for 13 years. Dr. Dhahand's career is grounded, Dr. Dhahand's career is grounded in over a decade of cancer research. She earned her PhD from the Ludwig Institute for Cancer Research and University College London and completed her postdoctoral studies at the Samuel Lunenfield Research Institute, Mount Sinai Hospital, Toronto. Her dual expertise in research and publishing has made her a respected leader in advancing scientific knowledge and fostering innovation in academic publishing. Professors here present in the house, distinguished doctors, ladies and gentlemen, please kindly join me as I bring up to the stage now Dr. Ritu Dhand for her keynote session. You're welcome, Dr. Ritu.
Thank you so much for your very, very kind words, Hope, and the very generous introduction. Thank you to all the organizers for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm going to give you a whistle-top tour through how research publishing has changed over the last 2 decades and how the Springer Nature journals are trying to support a more global, diverse publishing environment. So without further ado, I shall get started. So I'm going to start with an overview of the research publishing landscape over the last 20 years and talk about the changes. We will then talk about the importance of reviewer and editor diversity in today's research landscape. And then we will talk about how Springer Nature values inclusive science and research publishing equity. Okay, let's start with the research landscape. So, one of the biggest changes that has happened over the last 20 years is where the research is being done. So this is a table looking at the number of citable documents, citable research documents published across all research areas in 1996. That's on the left-hand side. And you can see that the United States was publishing the largest number of research documents, and followed by the United Kingdom. Japan was 3rd, Germany was 4th, and France was 5th. And if I looked at the top 20 countries that were contributing to that research landscape, then they were mainly Western nations. If you look at the research landscape today, and on the right-hand side is the same analysis, but done for 2023, you can see that China is now producing the highest number of research documents. Indeed, it's nearly double that of the United States, which is 2nd. India is now in at 3rd. United Kingdom and Germany are the 4th, 5th largest contributors. And if you look at the top 20 countries that are contributing to research publishing today, you can see in the top 20, South Korea, Brazil, Turkey, and Iran. So the research publishing landscape is a lot more diverse than it ever was, and that's great. So how has this change come about? So here we're looking into investment into research and development throughout the world. You can see in the first bar in 2000 and in 2000, firstly, how there was about 700 billion euros being contributed to research development, and 50% of that money and funding was actually coming from Europe and North America, with the rest of the world. Actually, it's more than 50%, it's 70%, my apologies. 70% of research funding was dominated by Europe and North America, with 30% from Asia and the rest of the world. And what you can see over the last 20 years is the contribution to research and development has greatly risen. So now the overall contribution is about $2,400 billion, which is a huge global investment. But only 50% of that research funding is coming from Europe and North America. And Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia have grown their research and development investment significantly to 39% of the global market share. And the rest of the world remains at 9%. And that is the reason that we are seeing China dominating in producing the most research articles, followed closely by India. So it's the contribution in money that has led to the increased volume. But what of the impact of the research? So this is two histograms looking at the G20 countries over the last 20 years. And on the left-hand side, the histogram is looking at the growth, which countries have grown the most from 1999 to 2022 in the G20. So the countries that have grown the most are on the left-hand side of the histogram, and they are Saudi Arabia, China, India, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, South Korea, Mexico, and Australia. And the countries that have grown the least in the volume of scientific publications in the last 20 years from the G20 countries are Japan, France, United States, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada. So what seems to have happened is that over the last 20 years, the growth has come from the non-Western nations, a huge amount of growth, whereas Western nations have grown the least over the last 20 years. And that was also reflected in the slide before when you looked at the funding. On the right-hand side is another histogram of the same G20 countries, but measuring average research impact from those countries from 2002, 2012, and 2022. So the purple bar is 2002 for every country. The lilac bar or the light purple bar is 2012, and the orange bar is the average research impact in 2022. We're using a metric called the field-weighted citation impact metric, which has been developed by Elsevier and is used on Scopus and SciVal. And if you get a value of 1 for the country, that indicates that the average impact of the research from that country is above average. So what happens when you look at this graph is if you look at 2002, that is the dark purple or blue bars that you can see, the only countries that had above average research impact were the Western nations. But if you look at the average research impact in 2022 for all those countries, you can see that the Western nation countries continue to produce research that is above average impact. But now Argentina, China, India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and Turkey are also producing research that is above the world average. So that is fantastic to see. What we've seen is investment into research and development that's led to a higher volume of research being published. And now what we're also seeing is the average impact of the research is also rising. So the quality and the impact of research is very high in some of these countries. Let's take a closer look at where Africa sits on this map. So this is, again, looking at 2019, looking at the investment into research and development in 2019. And you can see that Africa invested $25 billion into research, which is a huge contribution and a big, big change from 20 years ago. If you look at the contribution to research publishing from African countries, you can see that if you compare it to 2013, there has been a growth of 160% in the number of citable research documents that have been produced. In 2023, African countries produced over 170,000 research documents, which is a phenomenal number, close to what Germany is actually producing. The top contributors are Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, and Algeria. And this doesn't change very much over the 20 years. In 2013, the top contributors were South Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, Nigeria, and Algeria. So again, fantastic growth and change. And you can also see the number of citations that this research is producing. Up until 2023, there was nearly 190,000 citations to research from African countries, which is also fantastic to see. If you take a deeper dive and let's look at the sub-disciplines that some of these African nations are doing the most research in, you can see from Egypt, what the top graph is looking at is the number of citable documents on the y-axis, and on the x-axis is increasing citations. So the highest number of documents in Egypt are produced in medicine, followed by engineering and chemistry. And the highest impact research from Egypt is coming from medicine and engineering. And these are two major disciplines that are absolutely going to deliver good research for African nations. If you look at what South Africa is excelling in, you can see medicine is their field, which they are producing the highest number of research documents. That is also their most cited research area. But the other area that they are accelerating in is the social sciences. And you can see engineering is third. So again, some really, really great research being produced. One of the other changes that has occurred in the research landscape is editor and reviewer diversity no longer aligning with where all the research papers are coming from. In research publishing, we feel it is best practice if our editorial decision makers and peer reviewers are representative of the global and diverse communities we serve. And what we have found is because of the huge change in diversity of research publishing, our editor and reviewer diversity no longer are aligned with research activity. And that is a problem because we know that there is evidence of a homophilic relationship between the demographics of editors and authors. First, let's define what homophily means. Homophily is a known human behavior, and it's a tendency to associate with similar others, be they same race or same gender. And there are publications in the scientific literature which show evidence of a homophilic relationship between the demographics of the gatekeepers and authors and the outcome of peer review, i.e., you see higher rates of acceptance in gender and country homophily. Other publications we've seen is that diverse editorial boards are more likely to publish more diverse research articles. And there is one other one that I pulled out here. Non-white scientists appear on fewer editorial boards, spend more time under review, and receive fewer citations. And this is very bad for research publishing. So we are actively looking at the demographics of our editors. This is the current picture. You can see that most of our editors come from Europe and Central Asia, North America, East Asia, and the Pacific. And you can see that we have about 5% from African countries. So we are actively recruiting editors globally to diversify our editorial boards. And this is the journey that those editors take. So we find editors that have the right expertise, the right experience. They're usually early career researchers. We invite them to join the editorial board. Their details are displayed on our website. We train them up to become editors. We inform them, invite them to webinars to sort of keep them updated of publishing. We support them and we reward them as much as we can. And the criteria that most journals apply when they are looking to recruit new editors include they look at the researcher's publication record, they want the right expertise, they're looking at the number of publications that the editor has, their H index, they're looking at the career stage. We more often than not are recruiting early career researchers, and we're looking at their online presence, whether they actually have any editorial experience, awards and grants that they may have received. And this year alone, we have recruited just under 700 editors from African countries to our journals, and you can see some of the different portfolios that we have recruited onto. And this is a breakdown of the demographics of the editors that we have recruited this year. The highest proportion, 33%, come from Egypt, 16% are coming from South Africa, 14% from Nigeria, 8% from Ghana, 4% from Kenya and Uganda and Ethiopia and Morocco, and 3% from, I've got lost, Tunisia, 2% from Algeria, and the other nations are seeing 1% or less. So a fairly diverse recruitment exercise by Springer Nature. We do support global diversity. We support inclusive publishing because we feel it's more equitable. And in the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about our inclusive portfolios and why they are so important to us. Okay, so this slide is going to summarize how the research landscape has changed over the last century and why we currently have a problem. So journals were launched in the 1900s, the early 1900s. They were low article volume because they had to be printed, they had to be distributed. These all presented costs. And this led to the birth of what I am calling selective science journals. That means all the submissions that could be published are not published, but the editors are choosing the top submissions to publish. By the 70s, when the impact factor calculation became a lot more popular, this also cemented selective journals that were only publishing 5 to 20% of the most significant submissions that they were receiving. So 80 to 90% of research papers are being rejected from all journals, or most journals, I should say. And the problem this has presented is that 50% of funded research is not being published, which is leading to billions wasted in research funding because nobody else can see that research. And it's also leading to a huge waste in researcher time. Now, a proportion of the research that is not published will be flawed, and it should not be published. It should never be published. But there is a large proportion of that research, over 50%, that can be published, and it will include smaller studies, smaller advances. It will include negative results. It will include more descriptive papers, papers that are creating data sets or sharing experimental design. Now, these papers are incredibly important for advancing the rate of science. If negative results aren't published, that means every researcher has to repeat the science that doesn't work to find out that it hasn't worked before they can carry on. And we have created an obstacle to research discovery. More inclusive publishing is absolutely beneficial to our society. And COVID showed us the benefits of more open and inclusive publishing. Because during COVID, every paper was published in a journal. All journals were a lot more lenient in what they were publishing, and they were practicing more inclusive habits. We saw a lot of data papers being published. We saw a lot of code papers being published. We saw a lot of papers on experimental design. We saw negative results being published in most journals, and we saw every small advance being published because it was considered relevant to the pandemic. And because so much research was published of all forms, we went from a deadly disease to drugs and vaccines within 18 months. And that could not have happened if we hadn't shared the negative results, if we hadn't shared those smaller studies which form the building blocks of research. And more inclusive journals like Scientific Reports, BMC, which is our BioMedNet Central journals, and Frontiers and MDPI journals, who are all more inclusive. They published a lot of this research, and they played a key part in leading to the drugs and vaccines for the global pandemic. We at Springer Nature believe in inclusive publishing. Inclusive science is about understanding that research can advance discovery in foundational as well as in fundamental ways, that negative results are as important to scientific understanding as positive ones, that sharing data and experimental design studies is vital for reproducibility. It's recognizing our societal challenges are global, that regional novelty has value, and ensuring all researchers have a voice. It's the belief that all validated research is worthy of publication, promotes trust, and has a role to play in the scientific literature. And we have a portfolio of inclusive journals. And you can see those journals on the side: Scientific Reports, which is part of the Nature portfolio, the BMC series journals, Discover. We have inclusive journals within the Springer brand, and we have our new Curious branding as well, which is inclusive. So what happens on an inclusive journal is that the editors should not be rejecting based on significance, which is such an abstract term. As long as the research is scientifically sound, it's making an original contribution to the field, it's been carried out using appropriate methods to agreed community standards, and the peer review process has been successful, it will be published. It will not be rejected on the grounds of interest or significance, which is where 90% of our journals are rejecting the research. These journals do encourage submission of a broad range of research types, and they do consider regional novelty to support diverse and open science values. What is regional novelty? I just want to give you an example of how important regional novelty is. So, for example, let's talk about a water purification technique. if Western editors are assessing a water purification technique, they will be looking for a technique that uses the latest technology, has the most sophisticated technical advance, uses very advanced, sophisticated infrastructure to implement, because in Western nations, that is where the advance lies. But that type of purification technique probably won't be appropriate for many countries in the global south, which may not have the funds to be able to support the cost to installing such a water purification technique, or even if they can install it, they can't maintain it and upkeep it, or the economic infrastructure can't support it. So actually, for water purification in some global south nations, we don't want papers that are using the highest sophisticated, most expensive technology. We want papers that will work with less sophisticated technology, that are cheaper to install, that will work in the social infrastructure of some of the global south countries. And that is the importance of regional novelty. These journals, on the inclusive journals, we have the highest diversity of editors and published authors. And these journals are impactful. Over a third of the research output from the inclusive portfolio directly addresses the UN Sustainable Development Goals and is contributing to resolving society's biggest global challenges. And if that isn't impact, I don't know what is. These journals give the Global South an active voice in research publishing, because it's so important that every researcher has a voice in publishing. And we're also supporting equitable publishing. 44% of Springer Nature's research is now published open access, and we are working to eliminate barriers to equity in publishing. So we have over 3,700 agreements with institutions globally. And I've just highlighted agreements with African institutes here. 150 Egyptian institutes working with the Science, Technology and Innovation Funding Authority, as well as the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. This means that authors, researchers from these 150 institutes do not have to pay the APC because their institutes have already covered the costs. We also have an agreement called the SANLIC Transformative Agreement for SANLIC institutions from as well as the University of Botswana and the University of Namibia. We offer waivers and discounts to our authors that can't afford to pay. And in 2023, we waived 26 million euros in publishing fees for authors on fully open access journals. We're also experimenting with new programs to support countries that aren't eligible for support. We have several journals that are covered by Diamond Publishing. Curious is one of those portfolios, and then we have individual journals where costs are covered by sponsorship or some other form. We are founding members of Research for Life, through which we offer free online access to all our journals in eligible countries in the low to middle income range as defined by the World Bank. And we also offer waivers to those countries too. I want to, penultimate slide, we have over 3,000 journals serving different author needs. And we feel that each journal category plays a vital role in advancing discovery. We obviously have the big prestigious journals. That includes the Nature family and other prestigious society journals and academic journals. These journals are important for giving our authors enhanced visibility and recognition, and only key milestones are published in these journals. The very big door-opening pieces of research, they do tend to be very selective and they are low volume. But equally important to these journals is our inclusive portfolio of journals, which you can see here, the third block. These publish the building blocks to discovery. They publish negative results. They'll publish experimental design papers. These journals are equally important in advancing scientific research. We need both types of journal, not one or the other. And it's very, very important that researchers recognize these journals as being equally important. And of course, there's a lot of academic journals that are in between, where fundamental research findings can be published. We feel very strongly that all validated research has value and a role to play in discovery. And I want to end on this last slide. We published over 20,000, we've accepted over 20,000 papers from African researchers in 2024. We've also published several books and book chapters. And this is just a small flavor of the papers that we have published. You can see papers in the Nature family of journals, BJC, book chapters, and some of our academic journals. There's no way I can feature them all, but just a flavor to show you some of the great research that we have been publishing. And with that, I will say thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu. Thank you so much. That was quite comprehensive and impressive. Thank you so much. We appreciate your contribution. Thank you. I hope you're open for questions now, while we take a few questions.
Absolutely.
All right. So please, let's kindly signify if you have questions so that we'll be given the permission to speak and ask our question. Okay, so I have one hand up already. Shogode Babatunde, please kindly unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I want to appreciate the speaker for that lucid and succinct delivery. I want to say a big thank you to you. And I want to appreciate the organizer of the seminar, of the workshop, for a great job done. And in addition to that, I'd like to ask the speaker if, as someone who has an experience with publishing, though like in scholarly publishing, in book publishing sector, how do I get engaged by Springer Nature publishers?
Well, normally the editors commission the content themselves, so they will write to researchers because they have areas that they are trying to cover. But it doesn't hurt to write to the editors yourself and say you have a proposal for a book and give a brief outline of what your proposal is. And and then see if they are interested.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ma. Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay. And a promise, Chineye, please kindly ask your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that insightful and
And a promise, we can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ma, for that insightful presentation. Ma, I'm sorry, you talked about negative research or negative results, publishing researches that negative results. So I want to ask, based on that, I actually had a recent research that I got a negative result, and I was thinking of dumping it and going for the ones I had a positive result. So in that case, should I go ahead and publish in Springer? Then secondly, I also want to ask the procedures or the requirements for one to publish with Springer Nature. And if possible, the cost implication. Thank you so much, Ma.
Okay, so the negative, a negative result needs to have value to your research community. So I don't know what field you are in, but examples would be a negative clinical trial is important. We should know which clinical trials aren't working. It could be, I don't know if you are expecting a phenotype in a mouse study. Maybe you're expecting to see a heart defect, but you don't see that. You see something else, or you don't see anything. That is the negative result that would have value to your community. Those types of papers can be submitted to, we have launched a new, two new portfolios. They're called the Discover portfolio and Curious. And there are lots of different subdisciplines for journals. So you have to find the journal that's relevant to your discipline. And you would just submit your research to those two journals. Curious has very low publication fees. I can't remember what they are, but you can also publish for free if your paper doesn't require any editing. And Discover, I think also are doing, because they're newer journals, they may have a discount on the APC as well. So I'd encourage you to look at the Discover and the Curious portfolios to see if there is a journal of relevance to your research.
All right, thank you so much, Ma. Up next to bring up Festus Oni Bede. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I was so glad to be part of this conference. The previous questions align with mine, but what I actually want from you is that as a budding scholar, is there any requirement or guideline you can give in submitting to Springer Nature that will lead to publication? Because oftentimes I've tried a lot. At times they will tell us this journal does not publish this related paper. They will send to another one. At the end of everything, it won't yield any results. Could you please elaborate on that?
We have over 3,000 journals. We have over 3,600 journals. So, and every journal is independent and is run by Most of the journals are run by academics, and they will have their reasons for rejecting research, whether they think it's of interest for their journal or within scope for the journal, many different reasons. So I can't comment on that, but I would encourage you to submit your research to our inclusive journals. And as I've just said before, look at Discover journals, look at the Curious journals, and we also have scientific reports. They are our most inclusive journals, and they will at least send your research for review if it appears to be asking a valid scientific question. Does that help you?
Okay, I guess that answered his question. Maxwell Soundo, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Doctor, for such a wonderful presentation. And it's actually an eye-opener to most of us. But I just want to be clear. I wouldn't know the source of your information, whether it's just centered on Springer or you were able to access other publishing organizations' platform to get the data that you projected. Because one, most of the things that sometimes is most especially amongst most of us that are young researchers, we don't have much fund to be able to publish. By the time you say, okay, you want to send a paper to Springer, you see $300. In fact, once it's above $100, we find it very difficult to send such paper and then pay the publishing fees or whatever. So, and most of the Springer publication, we see 500, 450, even up to 900 and above. So, and then we can leverage on the little income we have to publish in other publishing organizations. So, were you able to access such information, this information from other platforms, or it just from the Springer that you came up with these conclusions? Thank you.
When I looked at the world data, that is from, publications, but mostly what I'm talking about in terms of journals to submit, and I talk about the inclusive portfolio, I'm talking about Springer Nature's portfolios. Because we have many, many different portfolios, and I won't talk about what other publishers are doing because that's for them to talk about. So it's mainly Springer Nature I am talking about.
So please can another question. You can speak up. We can't hear you.
Okay, is it Musa Yusuf's turn?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, Dr. Ritu, thank you for your eye-opening presentation. You've made mention in your global TA expansion program that over 150 Egyptian institutions have benefited so far. How can Nigerian institutions benefit from such programs, and what advice can you give us?
So the way that these agreements work is that the institution or the government work with Springer Nature to pay the fees for publishing for their researchers, and we give them access to all our journals in return. So it's not something you can do as an individual. It has to be done by the librarians or the heads of the universities or the institutions. They contact Springer Nature and they say, we are interested in looking at taking out a transformative agreement with the Springer Nature journals. So that's how it works. It's at an institutional or a country, but a much higher level than an individual researcher.
Okay. So in our own case, Nigeria, you should university go for that or a country? Which one will you recommend?
Depends on you know, if the Nigerian funding bodies want to come together and say we will pay Springer Nature the publication fees for access to all their journals, then it's up to the authorities. It's not a recommend, it's the costs will go up depending on the number of researchers you want to cover, the number of publications you want to see. So it has to be a much higher level conversation between those leaders that will pay and what Springer Nature can offer you. It's a negotiation.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu. I hope that answers this question. We have Shafiu Abdul Majid. Go ahead and ask a question, please. Okay. Ndirandu Ngujiri, please go ahead and ask a question, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doc, for the question, for the presentation. It's a very rich presentation that you have made. Well, there's some data that I'm getting from Africa, the raw publication we have in Africa. And one thing you find that as African or from the global south, we don't do peer review among ourselves. We don't do reference among our journals. At the same time, we have very few journals in this side. And one the big thing we have is the low budget from the government and other research institutions. This makes the researchers have more motivation whenever they're doing the research. Maybe my question, what ways as researchers can we do to engage more in research and produce more work in the global south? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat your question, please? I didn't quite catch it. Are you asking me what can researchers from the global south do to be published? Is that your question?
What can they do better to publish more?
What can they do better?
To publish more, because we realize the raw publication, and also realize when we talk about China, there's high publication, economical growth. So as a researchers, we do more research in global south. That means high economical growth in the global south. What can we do? How can we play our role in economical growth in the global south on this? Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, as a publisher, we allow all our authors to use software like ChatGPT to improve the grammar of the scientific research that they write. So if you have access to those AI software, we would encourage all researchers to use that software to improve the grammar so that it's easier to read. Pay attention to the guidelines that the journal has put in place so that you present the research in the way that the journals want to read it. And lastly, but probably most importantly, spend time in the abstract explaining why your advance is so important. Researchers always forget to do that. You have to say, this research is so important because currently we are unable to do X, Y, and Z, and this will help us to do that. Researchers don't make the advance clear on a research paper. And it's really, really important to do that. And if your research has relevance to issues that only affect the global South, then you need to say what those issues are and how your research will contribute. Because editors around the world won't understand. In a global world, which is where we are, everybody doesn't recognize everybody's issues. So as researchers, it's really important that we make it clear where the research will benefit society, how it will benefit society. I would say that is one of the most important things that researchers can do. Does that help?
Thank you so much. It helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Isaac Aberejo, please go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Okay, thank you. Hello, are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, actually, I didn't raise up my hand, but I think I'm also to really appreciate the lecture because it's something that is an eye-opener to let us see even the performance even in Africa. And some of the things that are raised even by those who ask people questions, there are something that's very germane and which, of course, needs people to be looked into. But however, my own question is going to be that I don't know whether you have addressed it before, and that if somebody wants to join, want to be a member of an editor, even in any of these Sugar Nature, even journals, is there any guideline even towards that, like visiting even your site, or maybe something you can just give us here now? Thank you.
I'm very sorry, but I didn't hear half of that because you were breaking. And somebody else heard the question. Could you say it to me or summarize?
Okay, let me just put it on the chat box. Maybe I'm having problem with internet connection here presently. I will put it on the chat box.
Okay, okay, that's a good idea. Yes, please do put it into the chat box. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Dr. Ritu, I guess he was trying to ask that if someone wants to be an editorial board member in Springer Journals, are there guidelines or there are some tips you would want to share? I think that's his question.
Okay, I can answer that. So if you want to be an editorial board member, one of the things that we will ask is that you have published 5 to 10 papers at least, nearer to 10 if you can. That is important because that shows us that you have the expertise to do the peer review. And then if you look at some of our journals, like the BMC journals, on their home pages, we have calls for editors. You can put in your details and then we regularly go through those lists to recruit people with the right expertise that we are looking for on different journals. So that is something that you can do. The other thing that you can consider is we have just created Springer Nature research communities. which are open to all researchers. You can register on the research community. You are allowed to post content, you are allowed to engage with other researchers in your community. There's 44 communities. So if you're an immunologist or an engineer or a clinician, you sign up for the different communities. And we haven't yet put a call for editors on the research communities, but later next year, we will be putting a call for editors on the research communities, and then you will be able to sign up using that vehicle. But in the interim, I would say to everybody here, in order to engage with other researchers and see research for free, it's free access, free to register. All our journals are on the research communities. All our authors are invited to join the research communities, but you don't have to be an author. You can just register for the research community, and you get to engage with all researchers globally. So, and that is free to access. So I'd encourage everybody to do that.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ritu. Sarah Onugu, please go ahead and ask your question. Sarah Onugu, are you there? Okay. Since Sarah is not there, Abidemi Adeni, are you there? Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Doug, for that wonderful presentation. Going through the last page of your presentation, you said 40% of Springer Nature journal are open access. But based on my experience, I think I've been trying to publish there, like selecting open access, but it takes time. For instance, I have a paper there, like 1 year. Hello? Like 1 year, they will not attend to your paper. And also, compare to Elsevier, like if you publish in Elsevier open access, within 6 months, you get response. So, but Springer Nature, like a year, they will not even attend to you because you select open access. Why is it like that? Or are they expecting us to be pushing funds or money? Because in this side of the world, research is not fully funded, unlike the Western world. So what can we do? Or yes, what can we do in order to make it easy for us to publish in Springer Nature in the open access form without wasting too much of time?
I'm really sorry. I know you're talking about open access, and I know you're asking me about publication, but could somebody repeat the question, because the sound quality unfortunately wasn't great. I don't know who helped me before, but could somebody repeat the question?
Yes, Dr. Ritu. I guess the question he was asking was how if Springer Nature has provision for some discounted publications or waivers for researchers from developing countries. I guess that's the question in a nutshell.
Yeah, okay, yes, we do. We absolutely do. We have discounts and waivers for the countries that are defined by the World Bank as being low to middle income. So they are listed on our website. All those countries are listed on our website. So it's free to publish if you are from those countries, or there is a discount to publish if you are from some countries.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ritu, for the insightful presentation, and it was quite educative. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. and we're grateful. Once again, Dr. Ritu Dhand is the Chief Scientific Officer at Springer Shop. She made our time to be here with us today at the Age International Conference. Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu.
Thank you very much to all the organizers, and thank you to the audience for such engaging questions. I've really enjoyed being here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
In our sessions, before then, we'll go ahead and have a little break. A little break. Thank you so much.